We are back with another episode of the Hail Call. I'm joined tonight with Mr. Matt Petraglia. We're going to talk a little bit about postseason hunting stuff. A little bit of everything kind of across the country. For the most part, the majority of the seasons are all wrapped up for the year. Matt, you said that you guys have a little bit of like a late extended season for residents, you said?
Yeah, we got a five bird zone here in the western side of Maryland, and we can shoot geese until March. Now, do we necessarily do that? We, it fills the void, right? Like you wrapped up everywhere else, and you still got that itch a little bit. And if you got a spot, and I'm fortunate to know a few good buddies that have some land out there. So, if they're there, we take advantage of it, get a couple more hunts in. I went last weekend. We did all right, and hoping to get, maybe one or two more before I hang it up and clean everything and put everything up in the garage for the rest of the year. But yeah, I got a little bit going, but for the most part, everything's all wrapped up here. No ducks, no duck season, so just geese, but and then snow geese, of course. But yeah, so I mean, pretty much wrapped up. Got a couple more in the bag if we can, but
Sure. Yeah, when your season kind of wraps up, what are kind of some of the things that you do to kind of close the door on the waterfall season, so to say? I mean, obviously the season's going to come to an end. You can't hunt anymore. But for a lot of us, the season doesn't really end on the last day of the season. There's
right,
always something to do.
right. I mean, and you still kind of I find like being in the marketing space for these types of guys too, like you still have everybody is still kind of in that waterfowl mode, I'd say until about March. So
Mm.
throughout February, if you are fortunate to be able to hunt, a late resident season, you got some guys still doing that, and then a lot of guys are selling off gear. So a lot of, I'm searching marketplace every day for,
Right.
stuff that I don't necessarily need to buy, but if it's a good deal, you pick those up. Other than that, I mean, I'm cleaning all my duck decoys off, hanging those up in the garage, washing the waders off, hanging those up, trying to organize everything because, the truck and the garage and everything becomes a huge mess during the season, right?
Yes. It becomes
So,
a giant catch-all for
yeah.
everything.
So trying to organize that, make it look pretty for, sitting in and
Yeah.
hang up your decoys, wash them off. I take a bunch of my duck decoys to the car wash and just spray them off Kirk McCullough style in the car wash. I don't I don't take my
Yep.
shotgun there and spray it off like he does, but
Right.
clean the guns up and put everything up and get ready for next year, or we'll get ready until turkey season. Or I mean, if you're a snow goose hunter, I'm not necessarily a snow goose hunter, but get the snow goose decoys ready and then you get your trailer ready, I'm sure, and get everything
Yep.
packed in there for a trip or two.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm kind of the same. This time of year, I would say for us, like because our season closes, yeah, at the end of the year, like late December, sometimes it might squeak into January just a little bit for our Canada season. Like you said, I think now is kind of a time. As soon as the season closes, I like to, and even, throughout the season, I kind of have a little notepad in my phone and I try to write down ideas on the areas that we kind of get our butt kicked, right? So if it's like, hey, we've been having a hard time hiding in a certain situation, what can I do for next year to help us with that? So sometimes that might be, if you're hunting edges, it might be lids on panel blinds, the flip lids. We had one year we were using our panels a lot for both snow goose hunting and for Canada's, where just having like the crossbars that come factory with like the tangle free panel blinds, it kind of gets to be a pain to move through the blind and space everybody out when you have to have those supports to keep those legs that come backwards
Right.
into the blind to hold the panels up. So one year we made like the wind brackets where it kind of eliminates all of those interior poles. It turns it more into like an A-frame basically.
Mhm.
And like you said, on Marketplace, now is a great time, not only for private party, but for like a lot of stores. I know for like myself, anything that I have that I'm trying to get rid of, whether it was a slow moving product or just something that I don't need to hold on to through the off season for hunting season, we put on sale. So now is a great time for, to scour marketplace, to go on the forums and, go through Facebook and all the different groups. And a lot of guys are getting rid of a lot of their stuff pretty cheap. And it's always a good time, if there's those things where it's like, hey, maybe I want a few more motion duck decoys. Maybe I want a few black duck decoys to stand out, like a little bit of legwork going on online. You can find a lot of pretty good deals on stuff versus waiting until fall to purchase all your stuff. And then sometimes availability can be a little tricky. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I
and
like what you said about the notes too. Last year I actually started like a little notebook, and after every hunt I just kind of write, I write the date, where I was hunting, who I was hunting with, what the conditions were, how we did, and just a couple, like if my dog made like a nice retrieve or how many retrieves she had. I put that in the book, and it's always cool to go through after the season. And I wrote it with the intent that I fill up a couple of these books, and it's something cool to, pass down to my kids or something one day.
mhm.
But it's always cool to go back through that throughout the year and say, well, we really tore this spot up. We did pretty well there. Vice versa. We really got our butts kicked in this area this year.
Right. Yeah, so, and then like you said, snow goose season's right around the corner, so it's kind of like no more than wrap up with your general waterfall season, and then I'm trying to gear up for snow geese. And our tactics for snow geese are a little bit different just because we're hunting in a different location. Rochester kind of has some rolling hills. It's a lot smaller fields. You get out to the Dakotas, it's flat, there's a lot more water. You're not really hunting birds coming out of a city, they're coming off of a pretty rural area or a refuge somewhere. And you're hunting a lot more flight versus hunting like birds going out a couple miles to feed and then going back into town. Some days you're hunting migrators. Um, and there's, just obviously the spread is different too. Typically you're using a lot more decoys, using backboards, which is something that I think is an underutilized tactic even for Canada's. Sometimes it's hard to hide a layout blind, even if it's in a cornfield. If they went through there with a mower and baled it, there's not a lot of cover in that field. So putting a layout blind isn't always the most practical. And hunting out of an edge isn't always the most practical either for, depending on the wind and what direction birds are coming out. So, that was kind of something that we started to use a little bit more was, just like for snow geese, using backboards with ghillie blankets. We use the beaver tail blankets, and they work really well. And then, as the season goes on, it's like, okay, what do we need more of? So when we're running, have a bigger group of guys when we go snow goose hunting, if there's 8 or 10 of us, sometimes it's nice to have more than just 10 of those blankets because you might get a little bit of snow and then it's going to warm up the next day. Now those blankets are soaked and they're covered in
Yeah.
mud. So, I always try to have extra of everything. When you're hunting around town and you're hunting close to home, it's not a big deal if something starts to break or fall apart, a layout blind or something. It's not always the end of the world. You can just push through that day and then you go home and swap it out. But, typically the snow goose hunts that I go on are bigger, bigger trips for the year and you're several hours from home. So having extras of everything is always key. So having extra backboards because you never know, you lean on one just right and you tear out some stitching or, like I said, a lot of times the Dakotas are tough because you just have so much weather change, and that's something, and not that you don't have weather change in Arkansas, this year, sometimes they're getting snow, you're getting ice. But one day in South Dakota in mid to late March, you might have 70 degrees one day, and then it's single digits for a low the next day, and then it's blowing 40 miles an hour, and then it snows, and then the next day it warms back up and it might rain. Um, and hunting over white decoys is a lot harder than hunting over dark decoys when it comes
Yeah.
to keeping your gear clean. So like
Yeah.
you said, going to the car wash, I've spent hundreds of dollars at the self-serve car wash spraying off decoys and um I think that's a big thing is if your decoys get dirty, try to clean them off right away. Because sometimes certain types of soil and like water and stuff like that, obviously the farther south you go, you start to see, even on social media, you can see it. You get an area where there's a lot more rust in the water. You get those big, heavy brown rings around the base
Yep.
of your decoys when you leave them out too long. So just making sure your stuff is clean. Um, all the little things that you kind of throw into a pile that need to get fixed right at the end of season is the best time to fix those.
Yeah, while it's
Typically,
still
you
on
don't
your
really have
mind.
anything. It's still on your mind, and it also helps so that way it's not. I mean, if anybody is like me, I'm sure there's a few of you out there where all of a sudden it's like, holy crap, goose season starts this weekend and I don't have half my stuff ready. I've been busy going to culling contests, been busy with the family, busy going fishing and stuff like that, but busy
Yeah.
with work. All of a sudden, hey, season opens this weekend and I have 20 Bigfoots that need all these parts screwed back on them. I have all this, I have a layout blind that's broke that I need to fix, stuff like that. So it's kind of nice having that little bit of a list, not only of things to try and work on, but also to fix too. So I like just going through my phone. I have everything. If I'm going to go on a trip, I have checklists in my phone because when you're going on a big trip, I mean, I'm bringing everything from tools to air compressors to, if you're in the middle of nowhere in the Dakota, it isn't necessarily just the Dakotas, could be any state or going to Canada. If all of a sudden you drive across some bean stubble and you poke a couple little pinholes in your tire, and at the end of the hunt, your tire's flat, it's nice having a air compressor or something.
Yeah,
We
and a
we
plug
usually
kit or
have a
something. Yeah.
yeah, so we have like a generator. I mean, I have extra everything. I always have way too many guns packed because you get one windy day when it's dry and dusty, and next thing you know, your gun is packed full of debris, and you got 10 guys out there, and most of them have forgot to clean their gun for the entirety of its life.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it's like, hey, my gun doesn't work, and I only have one. It's like, well, I don't want one gun to like not be working. Everybody's
Yeah, it's
invested
a
in the trip.
yeah, it's a buzzkill if, somebody that's kind of something I do too. Like I always feel like I'm way over prepared, which is a blessing and a curse, right? Like sometimes you're like, damn, like I have way too much shit. But like also at the same time, it's like it can be a real buzzkill if somebody is down and out and, they can't, everybody else is enjoying their time, but this guy
Hmm.
isn't. So I always like to be prepared for those that aren't as well.
Right. And that's the tough thing. I have I have a lot of high school buddies that come out, and it's kind of that one time a year that we get to hunt together. Now that I live 2.5 hours away from what I consider home, up around St. Cloud, Minnesota, where I went to high school. And when a lot of my buddies and like their dads and stuff come out, it's kind of the one time a year that we get to all get together and spend some time. So yeah, I hate to have somebody come up there and their gun doesn't work, or somebody's charging handle goes flying out of their gun, and now it's not working right. And,
Uh-huh.
so, and the problem is when you're running a group, it could be a big group or a small group, the system doesn't work unless everybody's on the same page, right? So when you go out, if you have, whether you have 6 guys or 8 guys, it doesn't work if you only have 5 blinds for six
Right.
guys.
Right.
Everybody has to have a blind. So all of a sudden it's like, hey, who's all coming out this weekend? Oh, so and so. Well, does everybody have a blind? Well, yeah, I think we do. But then somebody gets there, they forgot one, or they get there and it's broken and it's not working. Unfortunately for me, I'm usually that guy that buys all the extra stuff.
Yeah. Yep.
So
Yep.
even though I'm one person, like I have 4 layout blinds, I have 12 backboards myself, and it's like I just it doesn't work unless everybody's using the right stuff, right? You can't
Yeah.
have 2 guys in layout blinds and the rest in backboards and stuff like that. So, it takes a team, but
Yeah. And I
now is
like
the time of year
I
that
like everybody to have a good time too. Like I don't want to be like I don't want to be like sitting in these nice padded comfy chairs like that. This happened, the other weekend. I don't want to be sitting in these nice chairs and somebody else is sitting on a upside down 5 gallon bucket. Like
correct.
I want everybody to enjoy it and have a good time and be comfortable as they can be too. So no,
Yep.
I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah. And, this time of year especially, like I look at what did I struggle with the most? So like when we go snow goose hunting, we do it a little bit different. We don't stay in hotels. I have completely decked out the inside of my trailer. I've insulated it, have heater installed. I got a bathroom in there. I mean, it's basically a 18-foot fish house that we camp in, that I can pull a four-wheeler with a decoy trailer inside of my decoy trailer. But I look at what ways can I speed up our setup and what ways can I speed up our takedown, and that's where we went when we first started snow goose hunting. And it's the same way for Canada's for a lot of people too. When you have six different kinds of decoys, you have more of that garage sale spread where you have some Bigfoots, you got some greenhead gear, somebody's got a dozen Dave Smiths, you got some silhouettes. It's hard to keep all that stuff straight. These go in this bag and those go in the other bag. And then, especially when you have other people that aren't super familiar with how you have all your stuff put together, pretty soon you got Bigfoots in your Dave Smith bags. And, it just gets to be a little bit of a nightmare. So, like, what I spend the majority of my time with, regardless of if it's waterfowl hunting in the fall or if it's spring snow geese or if it's fishing, how can I streamline everything? How can I make our setup faster? How can we get stuff into the field faster? How can we get into the field like more cleanly? So what that looked like for me was, instead of dragging two giant otter sleds that by the time you put two seed bags of decoys, the otter sleds, you put some weight in them, they kind of suction down to the mud. They get a lot harder to pull, which means when you get into softer spots, you're leaving more ruts. You're throwing a little bit more mud because the ATV is working a little bit harder to get out there. So now you're leaving more tracks in the field. So I've switched from, one otter sled, then we went to two jumbo jet sleds. And then now I have built like decoy trailers the last couple years that I can fill with decoys because the wheels turn a lot easier than dragging a sled. So that allows me
Were
to,
you pulling the sleds with your four-wheeler?
yeah,
Like
yep.
on the
So like,
on like the bracket thing that Beavertail has, like one of them?
I just run ropes. So I
Just
run like a
around a ball
really,
hitch, yeah.
yeah, I like running a long rope. Um, just because if you do get in something soft, then all your gear isn't like right on top of the back wheels,
Right.
So if you do get, and I have custom built mud flaps that I made just out of like some rubber floor mats
Hmm.
that I have bolted to the back of my four-wheeler, and they sit almost all the way to the ground. So even if I do get into something wet, that blocks about 98% of everything.
Right.
Because the
But you
hard
said
thing in
you
this,
built you said you built these decoy trailers though, now that
yep.
you're using instead of these sleds.
Yeah, so like I took one of those, so Beaver Tail has like their mega sled, and it's like 8 feet long
Oh yeah, it's big.
and about 4 feet wide, and it's huge. But it's so long that it can be hard to fit in your trailer.
Uh-huh.
It takes up a lot of space. So Jet Sled makes one that's a little bit shorter, but it's wider. It's
Hmm.
like 6 feet long and probably 4.5 feet wide. It's almost more square than it is rectangle. And those work really well too. And it's a little bit lighter sled. They're not quite as durable as the Otter sleds, but they've worked pretty well. And then I went from that, and you put one seed bag, which are the seed bags that we have, hold about 70 snow goose full bodies. One of those in each sled plus a few. I mean, you're talking a couple 100 pounds,
Yeah.
in each one. But when it pushes down, it can be hard to get rolling, especially in
Yeah.
the spring when the frost is coming out. Sometimes it snowed the day before and now that melts. So I've switched and I took one of those sleds, and then I have like a snowmobile trailer tire. So
Hmm.
it's a small tire, but it's really fat and wide.
Hmm.
So they float a lot better. And I built a little trailer and put two snowmobile trailer tires on there. And I mean, you barely hit the throttle on the four-wheeler and you're moving
Yeah.
versus having to give it like a little bit to start pulling. So, and I did that, and then would sometimes, if it was dry enough, I would pull a sled behind that trailer. And now for this year, I've converted it. It's like a 6.5 by 6 by 5.5 foot, like almost enclosed trailer. It has an open top, but it's pretty tall, so I can fit about 300 full bodies in there. So it makes it the problem that we were having. I shouldn't say problem, but again, trying to streamline our system. We used to have all of our decoys were loose in my buddy Travis's trailer. I'd have 3/4 of my decoys are in his trailer, and I'd have 300 in mine. And you have to hand load them and hand reload them all the time.
Yeah.
Where with this trailer, so now, and if you're only hauling 200 decoys out at a time, you got to make 7 trips out to get everything. Then you got to bring out your backboards and all your ghillie blankets and stuff. So it's just more trips in and out of the field takes longer. So now with this bigger trailer, I might only have to take 4 trips out instead of 8.
Yeah. Well, I
So
now,
you
and
just
so,
become more efficient.
yeah, well, and tying this back into what we started on, these are the types of things that you learn from the previous year and things that you can work on, this time of year, like after the
Hmm.
season's over. So, you could say that you found this problem during the year. Well, now is the perfect time while it's still fresh in your mind
Yep.
to take all those ideas and, use the next however long it'll take you to make those things come to reality. So,
Right. Yeah, and I mean it's winter here. So like aside from going ice fishing, there's not really a lot going on in Minnesota right now.
mhm.
So it's a good time to work on stuff. I got a heated garage, fortunately, and so I can kind of work on some of those projects. But, I kind of have looked at the last several years. I look at what has kind of hurt our hunt more than it's helped. And, you know, hunting around pits and stuff in Rochester, the day in and day out vehicle traffic and ATV traffic, having like roads basically that go out to where your pits are, the tracks that they leave,
Mhm.
has been a huge giveaway to the birds, I think.
Yeah,
And
that
I
was
think the
something
same thing in the spring.
that was something I thought of really hard this year was, I mean, it seemed like from the first day that we drove out to to our pit that we created a road there. And, by the
Hmm.
end of the year, it was just that. It was a road.
Right.
There wasn't any winter wheat left there, and it was a road straight out from the road straight out to our pit. And I mean, after a couple of hunts, you're like, well, there's nothing we can do about this now. But I'm like
Hmm.
thinking to myself, like, damn, like, I wonder, that group that didn't come in, I wonder if that was the reason. And so makes you think about what you can do differently for next year. But like, I mean, I'm not gonna walk all my stuff out. So got to figure
Well,
something else out.
right. Yeah. And I mean, just watching how other people set their stuff shows me what I need to do to be different.
Hmm.
So, like when, watching the outfitters in various states for snow geese, especially when they're taking their ATVs out, because unless it's super, super dry, every now and then we can take our truck out. But all the trips with the ATVs in and out, and then everybody just drives their stuff, and you're making loops, and you're turning, you're knocking down all the corn stalks. You get in a low spot. Now it isn't even necessarily that you rip up the field; you're just leaving like discolored tracks on the stalks or through a bean field. And now when you go up in the air, like with a drone, and you look at it, you see all of these lines
Hmm.
going to all different parts of your decoy spread. When ultimately, if you're set up in a couple 100-acre field and your spread takes up, say, 10 acres, you see all these lines where you've constantly been driving around, where you have the blinds and all of that. So I'm always very conscious of like how I drive in. I always try to drive in a cornfield with the hedgerows,
Yeah.
regardless of where my spread is. I don't like cutting across any rows of corn
Yeah, you see it. And I mean,
because,
you
yeah,
can see it standing there too. I mean, if you switch your angle, you can see, oh, this is where so and so drove in and out.
yep.
So, I mean, and
This is where you drove in, dropped off decoys, and made a loop, and then came back
mhm.
out. And that's kind of what we see in the pits in Rochester. Is it's like a clover leaf with the pits in the middle because you
Yeah.
drive your truck out and then you make a loop to turn around to get back on the same road to go out.
Yeah.
And you're just, all those tracks I think is huge.
Yeah, and I was
And
thinking this year, like especially by the time that geese get to me in Maryland, like they've seen a lot by the time
mhm,
they get to me. And you got to think like, all right, well, if they were, if they were north and they saw this field that got, that had tracks in it and they got lit up in that field. Well, they're going to remember that and
mhm,
they might not come back to another field the entire way down to wherever they're going for the winter with tracks in it again. They
yep,
might just, literally no pun intended, flip you the bird
yep,
and just keep on going. So, I mean, I have a four-wheeler and I didn't even break it out this year to be honest with you. I just drove my truck out to the field. But next year, I really think that I'm gonna park on the road and it'll take me a little bit longer to unload the trailer and then hook the trailer
mhm,
up to the four wheeler and stuff. But it's getting to that point too where like I'm starting to think a little bit differently and I'm trying to make the most of my time, right? Like I don't really want to go out there just to, just to do it. Like I want to you want to be successful. Everybody does. So those
Hmm.
little things are stuff that, at least I'm thinking about this time of year, like what we could have done differently and what might have been successful and not successful.
For sure. Yeah, and I mean it's all the little things, right? So now is the time when you have time to think about it.
Hmm.
You can kind of reflect on, again, I'm always looking at where, not necessarily, oh, we did this, well, let's keep doing that. It's why did we get our butt kicked on these days? What could it have been, and how can we fix it?
Yeah.
And then because on the good days, you kind of ignore everything. You might get away with a lot that later in the season you wouldn't normally. On opening
Mhm.
day, you can probably get away with a little bit worse of a hide than you can when the birds are a lot more pressured.
Mm.
So, and having options, so going through my phone, I always have tons of notes. And then again, like checklists, right? So I know every time that I'm going to go hunting, I have a list of everything, and everything from, my shotguns to ammo, my e-collars having batteries, not only batteries to run the collars, but also batteries for headlamps and batteries for the remotes, and that's something that's on my checklist for this, having remotes on your collars. A lot of times they take a special battery, and you can't always just go buy that battery in the store. Some of them
Propane
take
for
like
your
a little.
heaters and all that kind of stuff too.
Correct. Yeah. So, I've really cleaned up a lot of the stuff that we bring, and we've kind of moved away from bringing the whole circus.
Yeah.
Have everything. And the tough thing with snow geese, there's so many different tools. You have your clones, you have persuaders, you have your rotary machines. You got socks, you got full bodies, you got shells. All of these different things. We've really tried to streamline, what we use for equipment, and it
Right.
just helps. It makes it more enjoyable because it's less to think about. It gets to be a lot when it's like, oh no, I got to grab. I mean, when we first started, we had tin snow goose shells that were made out of sheet metal and had a wooden head, and they were heavier than shit.
Hmm.
And having those out there, you got 150 of those, and then you have 200 Texas rags, and then you have 200 Northwind wind socks with the plastic heads. And then we had we had a few dozen TNT shells, and I bought a few full bodies. We had a few like greenhead gear oversized shells. I mean, we had just a little bit of everything made up till we had 1,200 decoys. But then when you go to pick up, you have a specific bin, you have a specific bag, you have a specific box, you have all of these things, and it all just gets piled in the trailer, and it just makes a giant mess.
Yeah. Well, it's like when you're picking up silhouettes, right? And you got to look, it's like, well, who put their silhouettes over here? And like, oh, well, the ones with this on them are mine. Make sure that these go here. So yeah, no, streamlining is definitely the way. And especially with snow goose hunting, it sounds like, there's making it as easy for yourself as possible, when there's a lot of things to forget
Hmm.
makes the job a little bit easier. So.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
so I guess I mean another thing a lot of people are shifting focus on, I guess now is the contest scene. I know that we have the Salt Lake City contest coming up. Maybe is it this weekend?
I think it's this weekend.
Yeah, so I mean that kind of seems like that kicks off the contest circuit for a lot of people. It seems
Hmm.
like it doesn't we didn't really waste any time there. As soon as hunting's over, I know people flying to Salt Lake City and
Yeah.
for call makers.
NWTF.
Yep.
NWTF is going on, I think, this week.
Yep, the call makers have that going on. And so
Teddy's not with us tonight because he's at a buy group show down in Phoenix that I probably probably should be at, but we kind of decided not to go this year, which it's a good thing we didn't because the sick bug has been going around up here like crazy. So half of our store is out sick right now.
yeah,
So
it
I'm just kind
seems
of I'm waiting to catch that. But yeah, there's the call making competition at NWTF. So
yeah,
and I
by
think
by the time this goes live, I mean it should probably have results posted. We were sitting here before we went live tonight to see if they were up yet to talk about that a little bit. I can't seem to
mhm,
find it if they are. So
yeah,
um
I always look forward to seeing that. There's so
yeah.
many
And
cool
then
looking calls.
oh yeah, and then they auction them all off too. So I mean I know a lot of those calls go for high money,
Hmm.
and it'll be cool to see. It's always, super super nice work, and I usually throw a couple bids on, and then the prices get outrageous, and I say I don't really need it. Um, but yeah, no, I mean we got NWTF, we got the Salt Lake City show, and I mean I'm sure that there are other contests coming up here soon as well.
Yeah, I mean, I know down south it looks like everybody's in Arkansas trying to chase the great white goose, which, man, I've had a lot of people and a lot of my buddies are like, "Oh, we need to go down there. We need to go down there." And with between the social media bickering between guides, I'm sure some of the listeners have seen some of that going on is a good way to pass the time for us Northerners. But
Yeah,
you know, it
you think
Arkansas
that
is
you think
such a
that
rat race, I feel
oh
like.
yeah, you think that waterfowl in general is cutthroat, and get into snow goose hunting, and then you'll see what cutthroat really is.
Oh, yeah. And I've been fortunate. I absolutely refuse to pay to hunt somebody's land. Not and how I look at it too is in today's day and age, everybody's sue happy, right?
Hmm.
But and I and if I have landowners and I've actually gotten out of having to pay for some stuff, not because I'm a cheap ass, but having to pay for a field, if money exchanges hands in a lot of states, if something happens to me out on somebody's land and I have paid them, the landowner is legally liable. So, like in Minnesota, we have a landowner liability act, which is if somebody gives me permission to go out and hunt on their property and I get hurt, I can't go back and sue them. And I know that sounds crazy to some people, and this is a little story. I actually got audited by the IRS in the state of Minnesota one year, for claiming whether it was money I made guiding or for contests. Because it was associated with hunting, they just assumed that I was paying landowners to hunt on their land. And they were like, well, you need to pay tax, on all of this stuff. You need to be paying tax. Like if you're charging for cleaning birds, if somebody's paying you to clean their birds and everything like that. And I had to explain to this lady on the phone, I'm like, I do not pay to hunt anybody's land. She's like, well, how do you have spots to go? I'm like, well, birds migrate. I was like, I don't guide pheasant hunts. So if I pheasant hunted, yeah, I probably would have to pay somebody to hunt their land, whether it's a game farm or something like that. And she thought that I just was paying money and like I was a shooting preserve kind of deal, which then you would have to pay sales tax on. So
Right.
I explained to her and I was like, and I told her, I was like, I actually refuse to pay anybody to hunt on their land because then they're legally liable. And she's like, well, that's not a thing. So I sent her right out of the Minnesota DNR reg book. It's like if somebody gives you verbal permission and you don't pay for it, that you can't turn around and sue them. And I know that there's other rules for certain things where if somebody trespasses on your property and they get hurt, they can turn around and sue you, which I think that's total BS anyways. But
Yeah. Nope.
and I've
Agree
told them,
there.
unless you pay for it, and that's why like a lot of your guide services are signing papers. They have a liability release agreement for a lot of these landowners. But to go, anyways, long story short, this whole like day leasing thing that's going on, and I understand in some parts of the country you're either paying to hunt or you're not hunting. I'm just a little old school. Like I refuse to pay somebody. Not only am I going to go out there in the event that I get my butt kicked, I don't want to be like, well, not only did we get our asses kicked hunting this field, I also had to pay $500 to snow goose hunt this guy's farm. And
Yeah. For what?
the cutthroat, back and forth and people stealing, spreads. I saw that there's one county they had about 5 different instances already that people were stealing people's equipment and the slashing tires, and what was it a couple years ago that farmer was
Was disking
disking
there.
under
Yeah.
somebody's decoy spread. I mean, I just want nothing to do with any of that, you
No, and
know.
that's not what it's about either. It's unfortunate that sometimes it's come to that, like where, like you just think like, well, why can't we all get along? But I mean, I understand it's, this is how some people, feed their families and,
Mhm.
it's their job and you got to do what you got to do. But also like you got to have respect too. So
Right. And
I don't
not and
know.
not all and not all operations are running like that.
No, it's
There's
just
just
like
gotten to be
anything. You
so
always
many.
hear, yeah, you always hear about the bad. You don't, oftentimes you don't hear about all the good stuff, the good parts of it. So,
Right.
um, I
I
mean,
got a
that's
buddy
just the
down
thing.
there that has a pit in Arkansas, and they got a permanent spread. And I know that's part of the bickering between a couple snow goose outfitters. One guy has a big permanent spread, and other guys hunting feeds every day, and whose is better. But my one good buddy that lives in Southern Illinois has got a spot there in Arkansas, and they shot 87 birds, I think, on like opening day. I mean, they have just as good a day or better days hunting a permanent spread. And the tough thing with snow geese is even they just don't pattern the same
No.
as most other birds. And then especially in the spring, you got guys that are doing like more jump shooting. Not many people are in Arkansas or any state really, Arkansas especially. There's a lot of birds that winter there. You don't
Hmm.
have that many people that are like jump shooting ducks off of these duck farms. You're
Hmm.
trying to keep as many ducks there as you can. But in the spring for snows, you got people that are shooting at them, off the levees. People are jumping them. People are running them up to get them out of other people's fields. You have the farmers that are running up birds. You have guides that are running up birds. You have people shooting at them with rifles and stuff like that. They just bounce around so much that it's like, oh, how can you know what's going to happen? Now, certainly, there are people that are chasing them every day and get on a feed. There are certainly some big hunts. I mean, when you do it and you do it right, there's nothing better. But man, I just feel like just watching it from a distance, seeing all these outfitters and hearing all the stories and seeing all the mud and just the back and forth and people complaining and fighting and damaging property and fist fights and stuff like that. I mean, I like going and when I snow goose hunt, I like being as far away from other people as I can get. I don't care. I would rather be 100 miles away from everybody and shoot 100 birds over 5 days than shoot 300 birds and be fighting off people, and people are stopping, and glassing your spread and, driving around. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean
I
that's
just,
that's kind of me with most things. I like to try to get away from the crowds with most things that I do, not even just hunting, if I'm obviously if I'm out fishing and stuff, I want to just, I want to be out there and enjoy my time fishing, crabbing and all that stuff. Just get away from people and I'm there to do my thing. I don't need to compete with anybody. I don't need to prove myself to anybody, that whole deal. So,
right. Yeah. Well, no, I mean, that's, time. I don't know where time goes, man. We're already about into mid-February. Got Valentine's Day here in a couple days. Um, it's just crazy how how fast time goes. It felt like our season just closed a couple days ago, and here we are. About a month away from getting ready to go chase snow geese. And you're one of the few places, Matt, that still has an open Canada season. I know there's a couple other states that run, like into February, but the rat race for snow geese has started, and
yeah, and then
it
we'll be chasing some turkeys here,
it's going to be,
before we
man,
know it
before we
too.
know it. Yeah, it's just a couple episodes away, and the turkey
Yeah.
season. I have a guy that I know that I think in Utah they still are in their fall turkey season, so he just shot a tom like yesterday, I think. Um,
Yeah, it's funny. I see all these. I'm part of all the Facebook groups and stuff too, and I see it's like it just seems like, the waterfowl pages were all going crazy, and now they've started to die down, and I'm seeing all the turkey pages starting picking up, and like,
yep,
who's going here? I just got all my trips booked, and what gun? What do you think about this gun and this setup and all of that? So yeah, I mean, it seems like we were just talking about, oh, the season's just getting started. We're ready to, we're itching to get going, and now we're, closing it up. So it's funny how
yep,
how it works like that and how quickly it goes. But
yeah. Well, yeah. So here, probably by this next episode, we'll have some results of the call making competition and Salt Lake City. For all of you that are going out there, have a safe trip. And we're looking forward to catching you guys on another episode. And we'll catch you guys next week. And thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Hail Call.